Morbo wishes these stalwart nomads peace amongst the Dutch tulips.
I'm sure those windmills will keep them cool.
Windmills do not work that way! Good night!
Hello everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is the Broken Meeple, a show where I talk and rant about board games, usually more the latter. We'll get on with the video in just a minute, but first my sponsor would like a quick word. As gamers, we find it hard to deal with empty shelves, some worse than others. You therefore want a supplier that has what you need at affordable prices and delivers on time. For me, that supplier is KIENDA. They offer a discount on bulk purchases as well as a point scheme for future acquisitions down the line. If there's a hot title you're after, chances are KIENDA's got it. Wingspan? Mine. Arc Nova? Mine. Eclipse? Actually, I hate that game, it's terrible, but you might like it. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
Got a bit of a treat for you today. I don't think many people have had a chance to look at this one yet. This is, very surprisingly, a game from Board and Dice. And you might think, hang on a minute, that is way too colourful for anything that comes from Board and Dice. And you would pretty much be right on that front. But no, seriously, this is from Board and Dice. This is Windmill Valley. This had a bunch of copies sold at UK Games Expo, but I believe it has not gone on full retail release yet. So probably expect that, say, maybe in the next couple of months or so, maybe around Gen Con time. And this is their new, what they call, lightweight Euro game. Now, lightweight, as we'll get onto a bit later, is probably to be put in giant if quotes, or maybe made with some comparisons, but still, this is definitely on the lighter end of what their catalogue typically is. It's another engine builder Euro with action wheels that you can customize, so, you know, the theme is not necessarily like, you know, dripping from this sort of thing, but it's got a very nice pleasant setting with the whole windmills and planting tulips and stuff in you know, the Dutch farmland and that, so it's got certainly a bit more of a visual appeal on the shelf than pretty much anything else they've done. The question is it all just, you know, nice looking aesthetics and colours, or is there actually some decent meat behind this as well?
Little bread and butterflies kiss the tulips.
Well, there's no dice to be found, but there's certainly plenty of victory points, because you're trying to earn the most points by planting tulips on your farm, which you'll acquire from a market, while also setting up little windmills on this map here to get various bonuses. But the crux of the game revolves around this action wheel setup that you have in front of you. So on your turn, you essentially have to turn this wheel so many revolutions depending on the water level that is set by player choices. And what happens is that when you have the wheel at the next section, the two actions at the top are your options for what you can do in a round. Now the right hand wheel doesn't have any actual choice, there's just one action and that's it, but the left one has all your major actions to the game. Market, windmill, shipping, planting tulips, that kind of thing. But as you go through the game, you are able to acquire upgrades that will be able to slot into little segments here and essentially make your action wheel more powerful. You'll be able to say, right, well, as well as getting a windmill, I get some money. And you know what? On this side of the wheel, I'm going to put a good upgrade that says when I do this particular action, I'm also going to get myself an extra tulip. And there's a simplistic ideas, but there's all sorts of different ways you can customize this wheel. And the speed at which you turn it can be augmented with tools or by adjusting the water level. So this is a choice that everyone can make. You can pay money, get some points, increase the water level, and it allows you to spin this faster if you want to get to certain actions a bit more quicker. But there's a limit on how much water you can let into a farm field, because otherwise everybody drowns and dies. Okay, it doesn't quite happen in the game, but you get what I mean. But once you've got all these tulips, what exactly are you doing with them? Well, you're planting them on your field here, preferably in such a way that you have all of the same colour in a single row, but different colours in all the columns, because this is how you will score the most points in that regard. And there's various placement bonuses you'll get for covering the tulips as such. You can also acquire helper cards, which have two uses, one of which is a special ability at the top of the card if you slot it underneath your top of your board, and one is a contract which at the end of the game will score you points based on a prescribed condition that you can slot underneath your board, and it's a dual layer board, so you can do this with ease. What are the windmills for? Well, windmills do two things. Firstly, as you uncover them from your board, you'll get points at the end of the game for planting certain colour tulips. But on this map here, which is a good chunk of the board, you can't even see it all in the camera feed, is where you're able to place these windmills on various spots so that you can get the bonuses triggered by the fields. To be honest, it's kind of a little bit over the top for what is necessary from a market board this size, but hey, it looks pretty, it's colourful, and at least you can't complain that you can't see anything on it, because trust me, you should be able to see plenty on that board. But essentially, it's kind of like a point salad game with a lot of little mini game actions that you can do. I mean, shipping is essentially just get some tulips or get some bonuses. Windmills is get bonuses and get them off your board. Helper cards is to get objectives and special abilities. And the action upgrades are to get an upgrade for your action wheel and get better actions to do. So there's lots of little things that all link together, but the actions are fairly straightforward. And essentially what happens is you play this over 4 cycles of your action wheel. So there's a specific marker where as soon as your wheel does 1 full rotation, you move along the calendar track and you get some bonuses, but as soon as somebody gets to the 4th section, finish equal turns, and then the game ends, flat out, count up all your points.
Of course!
Talk quickly about the aesthetics first, because Board and Dice are not known for having the most good looking of games. I'm sorry, it's just a fact. I mean, come on, look at some of the games they've done in the past, like Tiletum and Barcelona and Terracotta Army and that, and Origins. Are these really games that you look at and start putting it like, on awards for art and stuff? No, not really. This is, however, a very pretty looking game. I mean, the board cover is already enough for you to take a second glance at it on the shelf, wouldn't it? All the colours of the rainbow pretty much there and all the tulips there. But even the board itself is really nice. I mean, this map here, which you'll be able to see better in the photos, is, way bigger than it needs to be, but man, does it look nice and turn people's heads when people walk past. Your board is dual layered, so you've got a little marker for your money, you've got slots for the windmills, and you can easily slot cards all around the back of it because it's got little notches for your cards to fit into, so it's not like it just goes underneath your board. There is specific bits for them. Not quite as good as, say, what you might get in something like Lagrange, but still pretty damn good anyway. And your action wheels, they take a little bit to assemble at first, but once they're assembled, they work, they spin just fine. Perhaps a little bit too easily. You might want to make sure you don't knock these as the game goes on, because they are somewhat susceptible to just being nudged. But all in all, everything is designed pretty well with good quality cardstock. In fact, the only thing aesthetically that I think is a bit of a blemish are these little tulips. These tulips are basically just thick cardboard and nothing else. I mean, I know there's a lot of them in the game. I mean, there's way more than what's pictured here, and it would be expensive to make them all wooden, but
I think she's pretty.
Quiet, bud.
the rules to this game are pretty straightforward as well, at least certainly compared to their other fare. Now, they do call this a lightweight game. Let's address that rather quickly. This is lightweight if you compare it to a lot of their other games. Most of the other games, if not all of them in the catalogue, are heavier than this game is. That does not make this a light game. This is still a medium weight game. There is plenty enough going on in here. And even though the actions that you do in the game are pretty straightforward and the rules are not particularly complex, there is too much going on in this. Too much planning that you've got to do on here. Too many ways to score points in that, and to create combo turns to make this a lightweight game. It's just light by comparison. So let's not have people, thinking, oh, I've played Lords of the Waterdeep, now I'm going to suddenly progress onto this one. It might still be a bit of a jump, but not too big a jump. This one still, for most gamers, will be relatively easy to pick up. It's just for people who haven't played a lot of games, maybe there's just a little bit too much going on. But that being said, the rules are pretty easy to follow for the most part. There's a huge appendix at the back for showing you what every single card and upgrade does, although honestly, I think the graphic design on the actions themselves and on the wheels are pretty good anyway. There's only a few shipping based ones that you might want to check the rulebook, but otherwise you can pretty much guess it right. But the rest of it, the rulebook is laid out pretty well. It goes through the game setup in 2 pages, then important couple of concepts, and then step by step how you go for a particular turn before it goes on to the actions, which again don't take up much space, and then a simple bit for game end scoring. It is a fairly decent rulebook, which is why it's a bit of a shame that the blemish I'd have to say with the rules is on the reference card everybody gets. At first I thought this was a really good reference card. I mean, it's got the full turn structure on one side, and it's got all the actions with wording, rather than just iconography, written on the back. So it's pretty comprehensive. Unfortunately, there are 1 or 2 aspects here where it does neglect to mention a couple of key rules of the game. And these key rules, if you didn't notice them in the book, you might trip up on them when you first played it. One big important one is that this one makes a big deal about you adjusting the floodgates and how you do that at the start of your turn. What this reference card neglects to mention, and what some people have missed in their first game, I know I missed it at first for the first part of my first game, is that when you increase the water level, you can't increase it to such a point where the marker for the track, you won't be able to see at the bottom, but basically where it tracks the flood level based on the farmer's view, you can't increase it to such a level where your floodgate would make it move off the track. This is not present on your reference card, but it is such a key rule because it restricts what you're able to do on your turn in terms of spinning the wheel. So this is something really mighty important that they neglected to put on something that everybody has in front of them. Not to say that this is a garbage reference card at all, but that's just one example of a few where this reference card is omitting certain key niche rules that need to be explained to people.
Wingers, dingus, listen up.
Gameplay flows very smoothly. I mean, it is literally a case of take an action on the wheel, and sometimes it will only be one action, sometimes it will be two, but not until the late game. First round of the game, chances are you'll just be pushing it one bit at a time because you want a bit of everything at the start, and then later on you'll start wanting to spin it more. But these actions do not take a long time to resolve. I mean, take a card. Take a card, you might be able to refresh the display, but basically take a card. Okay, great. Upgrade. You could refresh the display, but otherwise take an upgrade. Okay, done. Shipping track. All right, so this card over here, put a tulip on the shipping track, get a couple of bonuses. Okay, done. Let's see, go around the, put a windmill down. Okay, so choose a spot. I'll choose this one here. Bonk, get 2 tulips and a tool. Right, that's my turn done. You'd be surprised how quickly these turns can go once you get used to it. When a turn takes a while, it's usually because of one of two things are happening. Firstly, the market. The market does take a little bit longer to deal with because you've got a 2-step process, ways that you can jiggle it around, a couple of, again, little niche rules that aren't necessarily explained as well on the card, but also the fact that because it really is important where you are on the market in terms of what tulips you can get and what it allows you to plant, there's a little bit more planning that needs to be done.
This bloke won't haggle. Won't haggle?
Also, you might have just a turn where you combo a lot of things together, and that usually comes once you've got upgrades on this, because the upgrades effectively they allow you to do potentially 2 actions in a turn. So I might do a windmill action, but I'm also doing a helper action. Or I'm also, let's say I'm planting tulips, but I'm also doing a market action. Well, okay, I need to do the market bit first, do that, spend some money, get those tulips, right, get those on the board, got to, get those on here, might have to pay a bit of money in order to, store them, okay, fine. And then on the next bit, right, now I've got to plant them. So I'm going to plant these on here. This gets me a free upgrade, right, I need that upgrade. You can see what I mean, that some turns can take a little bit longer than others, but that's rewarding for the player when they've made a combo turn. Everybody is going to make a lot of these combo turns, but those little instances aside, the turns still go at a pretty snappy pace, and it doesn't feel clunky unless you miss out one of those little key rules that I mentioned a little bit earlier. So all in all, fairly smooth gameplay. The game is all about building combos, and so if you are already intrigued by this action wheel, this is going to be a game for you because a lot of it revolves around this. If you were to just take all these actions in isolation, none of them are particularly that interesting. I mean, I put a windmill down, I get a couple of bonuses. I take a card from here, I take an upgrade from here. They're not by themselves interesting. It's what you do with this that heightens the game front. So the idea that you can create cool combos of turns on here, you can customize it how you like, that maybe somebody gets a bunch of upgrades that give them a lot of money. Okay, they're rolling in it, they can do more money-based actions. Somebody might also be just like munchkining on a particular action. I mean, you can cover the specific actions here. It'll be permanent, so all right, I never intend to go shipping ever, but I really want to get all my windmills out. Well, okay, well there's one windmill action. I then put an upgrade on the ship action, cover it with something else that gives me windmills. Now I've got 2 windmill actions. I can never go to the shipping track, but if I don't intend to, I can at least get my windmills out at twice the rate that anybody else would, at least before the game ends. So there's a lot of variation in how you can customize this wheel, even if your main goal of the game is to get a bunch of tulips on your field. I mean, that is one of the primary ways you will score points, and it's certainly one of the major mechanisms of the game. But you can create some cool turns with this wheel, and you might think, well, hang on, I can just kind of fix it so 2 actions are always the same and always great. Well, not true, because This wheel has 6 actions on it. This one only has 5. So you might set yourself up for the current round to say, right, after 2 more turns, I'm going to get upgrade and 4 money. Okay, brilliant. I've got a nice combo right there. Next round though, once I've gone around the full cycle, right, I'm going to get an upgrade again. And where's my upgrade? Where's my money tile? Oh, it's 1 off, because obviously if one's got 6 sides and one's got 5 sides, they're not going to always sync up. So suddenly the combo that you created in one round is going to turn into something else next round, and you got to adapt to that. So there's a strategy to the game in terms of what you're aiming for in terms of points, but there's also a few little tactical elements here and there about adapting to what actions you have available on the wheel. Add to the fact that you can vary with the water level what you do in terms of its speed. So it's like, right, well, do I turn it once? Do I turn it twice? Do I turn it 3 times? Do I spend some tools? I could even turn it 4 times. And then what's the repercussions of that? Because if I go too fast, I'm skipping a bunch of actions and rushing the game end. But if I do go fast, I'm the first person to go on this calendar track, which means I'm getting some extra little bonuses. And maybe I'm just not interested in some actions, but then you may decide I just need to go slow and steady. I want to go 1, 1, 1, 1, do a little bit of everything. Yeah, I'll suck on this track, I won't get some bonuses, but at least I'm doing a bit of everything and taking my own time. You've got a decent amount of options on how you can play this game, even if the end result turns out for the most part the same.
That just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
Game length's not too bad either. It quotes 45 to 90 minutes on the box, and once you get players who know what they're doing with this game, that's actually doable. The first game I taught to 3 brand new players, and I was new to it, I'd only played a demo of it at the expo, and then I decided, right, I'm going to learn the rules and teach it to people. We got the game done in just over 2 hours with 4 players. Now that's bearing in mind that they've never heard of the game before, and I'd never played it myself, and I'm still teaching it. So to get a 4-player game of this done in 2 and a bit hours when you're brand new to it is not a bad length. You know, too long if that was always the game length. But I have got it lower with 4 players when people got more used to it or when playing with more seasoned gamers. So I dare say 90 minutes is probably if you're going at a good speed and nobody holds up the game by everybody going slow. And there is a minor negative to that with the whole idea that you have a variable endgame timer because it's dependent entirely on the players. I mean, if all players start going really slow with their wheels, the game's going to drag out easily. But if one person decides to go like Speedy Gonzales around this thing, then the game's going to end a lot quicker. That itself is a little bit of a negative for some people. I don't mind it, honestly. But yeah, 90 minutes is not really a good fixed time. 90 minutes is perfectly doable with 4 players. Sometimes it's going to be 90, sometimes it's going to be 105, sometimes it's going to be 120. It's just gonna vary. And 45 minutes, if you're playing this solo and you know what you're doing with all the solo rules. Otherwise, you are still looking at a bit over an hour. Now, I've talked a lot of praise about this game, but it's not without its flaws as well. The helper cards and the upgrades, they're a cool way to customize how you play the game. I wouldn't necessarily call them overly balanced though. Some of these are definitely a lot more desirable than others. You know, stuff that gets you points can lead to a lot of points for the game. And yes, it is one of those where you score about 150 to 200 points if you've done reasonably well at the game, but something that gets you 2 points for doing an action can be spanned to ridiculous levels with this. But then other ones here where you get to lower the water level once, get you a coin. Okay, great. And, get an upgrade, get a tool. Tools are fine, but I find that I don't tend to use them too much. I find it's relatively easy to change the water level or to, plan ahead with your wheel that you don't desperately need a lot of tools. So gaining a tool from a card just doesn't really feel like that much of a good thing. And the contracts as well, some of these do feel a little bit easier to munchkin than others. I mean, you can get 10 points from planting an entire row of red tulips. So you have to get the exact color tulip, you have to be able to plant enough times to get them down, and you have to put them all in the same row, okay? And not to mention store them all, which you wouldn't be able to store 10 at a time anyway. But then that's 10 points for you on this contract card. But then there are ones where it's like, you get 5 points for every windmill that's next to a spot with a tool symbol on it. Okay, pretty much right next to the starting position, or at least very close to it, is 2 tool symbols. If I get 4 or 5 windmills on those spots, which I have done in a game before, then I'm talking 20-25 points for doing that. And I'm getting other benefits from taking my windmills off the board, whereas you're not necessarily getting as much benefit from putting a row of yellow tulips on your thing. So they don't feel like all in sense equal. But the other aspect is the luck factor that comes with this luck of the draw of the upgrades and the cards. Because if you take these too early as contracts, then you're kind of fixing yourself into a strategy from the get-go, but you're not getting many cool abilities to help forward that. So you might decide, well, I'll wait till later and see what contracts come out later. But then there's two problems with that. Firstly, somebody might just happen to nick the card you want, but also because you have a situation where, you know, you've got a contract or so, maybe you've got space for one more and you're just doing stuff, you're just getting tulips out, a few windmills, and you just happen to have got an entire row of violet tulips. Yeah, let's say that. A whole row of violet tulips. You weren't doing it because you had a card, you just did it because it filled up the spot and you just happened to have a bunch of them. Then the contract turns up out of nowhere that gives you 12 points for a row of violet tulips. So for anybody else, it's completely useless. But for you, it's amazing. That person just drew a 12-point card for doing diddly squat. Somebody else might be putting a bunch of windmills down and they never see a card with windmill points on it. It's unlikely, you should see at least one, but still, I might have put 6 of my windmills down all over the place, and then a card comes out saying, well, 5 points for every windmill you've put next to a market. Oh, I didn't go next to any markets. That contract's useless. So there is a little bit of a luck aspect. It doesn't happen as much with the upgrades, but certainly with the scoring cards, it is possible for somebody to just get a massive point swing purely because the right contract came out by fluke as the game progressed.
I'm lucky.
That's not a superpower.
On the subject of balance as well, the planting of the tulips themselves on your field. So you've got 4 rows here, and they've all got different placement bonuses on them. These are definitely not equal in power measure though, and they try to represent that slightly with the points value. You get half the points if they're all different colour tulips, you get all the points if they're the same colour. But the difference is literally 6, 7, 8, 9. You're talking a point, maybe 2, between a bunch of these, like, you know, these different rows, right? I told you that this is a game where you are scoring anywhere between 150 to 250 points, depending on how well you've done. Breaking 200 is actually pretty hard, but you know, you're talking in the hundreds, high hundreds if you've done well and won. Do you really care about a point difference? Hell, I mean, it's not even that many extra points to put them all in the same colour. You know, if I put them all in the same colour on the bottom row, I get 6 points. If I don't, I get 3 points. Is 3 points really that big a deal? You know, you go so much effort to try and make them the same. But then also the bonuses. A couple of these rows, I can get a helper and a tool. Great, and a little bit of extra money, but you know, there's other ways to get money. Top row, well, I can plant a couple extra, but that's about it. That's all I get, and a couple of points there, that's it. But the bottom row, you get 2 free upgrades. Upgrades, the cornerstone of your engine, the thing that makes your action wheel that much better. Yes, it's the lowest scoring row on here, but again, 6 points compared to 7, 8, and 9. Who cares? Every game, and I mean every single game, every player chooses the bottom row to plant first. Without fail. Because why would you not? Why would you not want 2 free upgrades early in the game? You can plant on the other rows later, but to get 2 free upgrades early is infinitely better than anything else on this row, with the exception of one spot which lets you score a contract in the interim game, which is great, but it's on the 3rd spot. So you would never take it early, you only take it later. And so this, as much as there's a little bit of variety with this tulip field, I find that it's pretty much a linear progression because there's easily an optimal way of going about this, which means everybody follows that optimal route, and suddenly you don't feel like you're very differentiated in this aspect. Now, you get points for taking the windmills off because they let you plant different colours.
Windmills do not work that way!
That's all cool, you know, that's nice. Not everybody gets all their windmills off. But really, most of the points that you get in this game are going to be the contract cards. And again, some of them may just come out by straight luck, but if you try to play this game and ignore contracts, you will lose. End of story. If you somehow win without dealing with contracts, like you only get 1 contract in the game and you still win, then I would declare everybody else around the game to be legally dumb and blind.
That escalated quickly.
You would have to be like actively trying to assassinate your own game if you lose to somebody who doesn't have contracts. These can score you a bucket load of points, which means it's mandatory to get them. And what I'm trying to get at here is, as much as there's a decent amount of variety in the paths you can take, when it all boils down to it, it is very much a case of just get stuff on the bottom row of this tulip field first, without fail, and get free contracts and make sure you get them. They are the bulk of your points, and to do otherwise is just telling yourself you're gonna lose.
Second place? That's a fancy word for losing!
It's not the most interactive game ever, and that having other players at the table doesn't overly matter that much, because all the other players do is just act as another person who can take stuff that you were after. That's it. Nothing else. There is no other means of interaction bar a tiny little gimmick with the market where you get to move these little markers around, and if you've got more markers at a particular place where you go to, you get more actions. It's a weird system, it doesn't make any thematic sense, but that's literally it. And it's not like I can scuffer you by saying, ooh, when will you go to the market? I've no idea really, but I guess I'll move my marker to make it harder for you. No, you wouldn't. You're doing your own thing. So I don't really care what the other players are doing around the table, which means why would you play this with a bigger group of players? It just makes the game longer, and that's all it does. You know, the idea of somebody taking something that you might want is not player interaction, okay? That is not what we call player interaction. It's just an obstacle, and this is replicated enough anyway in the solo mode, which honestly is a pretty decent solo mode overall. It's a fairly simple system. I mean, you've got a tiny amount of setup changes, and then you've essentially got 4 pages of rules, including the endgame scoring, where it talks about what the AI does for, you know, their turn, but all you're basically doing is trying to beat a certain, like, you know, point criteria. The gardener will score based on what it takes, and you have to beat the gardener. So there is at least not a beat your own score to this. But really, all it does for the most part is just remove stuff from the board and takes up spots with the windmill. That's kind of it. It takes cards, it takes upgrades, it takes spots on the shipping track, and it takes up spots on the windmill map, which is exactly the same as what multiplayer opponents are doing. So honestly, why would you play this game in anything other than solo and possibly 2-player mode? Not to say I have not enjoyed my games with 3 or 4 players. I have. But that's mainly because of the group round the table. Them being there does not elevate the experience of the game. It simply is having a group of people you know and want to hang out with. But that's not the game's credit, that's the group's credit. You know, so for the most part, I find myself wanting to mainly play this solo. But saying that, because of the game length not being too long, playing this with other players is not as big a deal as playing some like 3-hour Euro, for example, where the 3 hours is non-interactive. You know, the fact that this is a shorter game does mitigate some of these issues. So Windmill Valley is following some of the tropes that we've seen in Board and Dice's games, but it's also trying to separate itself from the range. I mean, there's no dice, I wouldn't call this a tea game in any respect, this definitely feels like its own thing. And the fact that the aesthetics are as pretty and colourful as they are here is certainly a departure from the norm, so it's good to see this stand out as something a bit more unique in their range. Of course, it is for the most part an abstracted Euro with a bunch of mechanics and point salad mechanics and getting a bunch of victory points to win the game. I mean, that's kind of the nature of the beast. But this one has still impressed me for how smooth and relatively light it is. You know, the fact that most of their other games that I've reviewed, like Barcelona and Taltum, they've either been dull and boring. I mean, Taltum bores me with, you know, how tedious the actions are. And, you know, the Barcelona one has some more interesting actions, but man, it's just a point salad mess of clunky, fiddly rules, and it takes forever, and you've got a million points to score, and it's just too much faff. This one just feels clean, smooth, while giving you a decent amount to think of and not overcomplicating it for players, but not making it stupidly fiddly either. I mentioned a couple of little niche rules that they could have mentioned on these cards, but if you can get those down, that won't be a problem for you. And I've been able to teach this to players who generally don't play a lot of heavy Euros, and it's still gone down well. That being said, nobody's really walked away from the game going, this is the best thing since sliced bread, but they've generally had positive feedback. I do like how smooth it is, I do like how pretty it is, I like the variation I have with what contracts I can go for, what abilities I can grab, and how I can mess around with this wheel, even if for the most part I'm still kind of following the same path on my field, as well as following, like, you know, yeah, I probably should grab these types of upgrades, and yeah, probably should, you know, do this aspect on the windmill side. Yeah, there's a few little things like that that do make you kind of make the game feel a little bit linear, but you still have a decent amount of variety inside. The solo mode is definitely the way I would choose to play this for the most part. I think my highest rating would have to go to the solo mode for being still clean, still simple to operate, but giving you all the puzzliness that you get from the multiplayer game, but keeping it to about a 45 to 60 minute time frame, which is not bad for a Euro, particularly from this publisher. But I do wish that there was just a little bit more in the game to make me care that there were other players sitting at the table, especially when you get to the 4-player mark, where the game can drag out a little bit beyond the 90-minute mark, especially when you have the variable endgame timer. It only takes, if all the players start going at a relatively slow speed, you could be there for a while. You need one person to be going fairly zippy through this, and it's not like the game directs you to do that. It might not even be the best idea to do that, frankly, at times, but yeah, the variable endgame timer does fluctuate the game length a little bit. So there's some problems with this game, but for the most part, I still think it's pretty good. It's just a case of what recommendation I can give it from a rating. I mean, when I first played it, I was thinking, oh, this has the potential to be distinction level rating, that this could be really, really solid. But it has dropped a little bit as more plays have gone on the basis that I am feeling a little bit samey in some places, even though I can vary it with the cards. And there have been occasions where some people have won, mainly because of luck of the draw of these contracts coming out at exactly the right time. That's a little bit problematic in a game that can go up to 90 minutes to 2 hours long. It's not so bad when you're playing it 2-player and you get it done in about an hour, hour and a quarter, but with a lot of players, it's a bit sucky when that kind of thing happens. So few little bumps and bruises, but still a pretty good game. I'm giving this overall a 7 out of 10. It's a good game, but check my player scaling. I think this actually bumps up to an 8 out of 10 if you play this primarily solo. Not to say that you won't have any fun playing it multiplayer. As I said, it's a 7 overall. But I think there's diminishing returns when you add more players, and I think that the solo mode does such a good job by itself of being simple to operate while still giving you essentially 95 if not 100% of what you do in the multiplayer game, because you play your turns as normal and you get the same feeling of playing with a single opponent with that as you do with playing more opponents. I think if you want something that's a little bit lighter but still decent amount of meat and it doesn't feel like a completely dry experience, then grab Windmill Valley. I think it will suit you down very well. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Don't forget to check out the rest of the content I've done, a little review of Forever Home from Birdwood Games, and of course I mentioned some preliminary thoughts about this from the UK Games Expo in my 2-part series that I did, so by all means check that out on podcast or on YouTube. Don't forget to also check out the link in the description and my code where you can get a small discount off your first order of games from KIENDA, my sponsor. Plenty of games on their site. Hopefully you'll find something that you like, and if you want to help support the channel, I do have a Patreon where your contribution helps me to keep the channel funded, pay the subscriptions, pay the fees, and acquire review copies such as this. This was personally bought at the expo. This was not a review copy, and Patreons help me to be able to do that and produce content for you. So until next time, remember, regardless of whether you consider this black tulip to be black or just very, very purple, it's still only a game. So bye for now.